Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here. Tonight and tomorrow, we are so pleased to welcome and celebrate the work of Albuquerque-based and South Valley-based artist Sheri Crider. This is the second in the 2025-26 Gale Memorial Lecture Series entitled Out of Bounds. The Out of Bounds series explores expanded practice in contemporary art through the work of 4 visiting creatives whose approaches resist traditional categorization and exist at the intersections of disciplines, materials, and methodologies. Expanded practice challenges conventional artistic boundaries, and the invited out-of-bounds artists reflect how contemporary art increasingly operates beyond fixed definitions, questioning what it means to be locatable or unlocatable within the shifting landscape of cultural, political, and material engagement. The fall out-of-bounds artists were Sheda Soleimani and Sheri Crider, and in the spring we will welcome Antonius Tinbui and Anthony Hudson. The Gale Memorial Lecture Series was established in memory of Dr. David Gale and his wife Sylvia, who generously made the series possible. This Out of Bounds series is sponsored by the UNM Department of Art, the UNM Arts Lab, thank you guys, the UNM Women's Resource Center, the Tamarind Institute, the UNM Feminist Research Institute, and the UNM Honors College. All the lectures and events throughout the series are free and open to the public. That was important to the Gale lecture series. For the first time this year, the series was organized through a collaboration between 3 UNM Art Department faculty members and 1 graduate student, each with a vested interest in expanded practice. Those are Stephanie J. Woods, Assistant Professor of Interdisciplinary Art based in our Sculpture and Expanded Practice area, Marcella Ernest Ojibwe, Assistant Professor in Art History, graduate student Dylan Lila, working across the department areas, and myself, Welly Fletcher, Associate Professor of Sculpture and Expanded Practice. Together, we developed this year's series of public lectures, workshops, adventures like the tour of Sheri's Gizmo building tomorrow evening, and discussions with the goal of inviting you, the UNM community, to engage critically with artistic practices that challenge place, identity, and meaning. In that vein, following the talk, please join us for a casual reception with the artist in the Maddox Sculpture Center mezzanine, which is 1 block that way down Copper, where we'll have some local favorite Coda dinner snacks and some New Mexico ferments kombucha to continue our conversation about Sheri's work together. And don't forget that tomorrow evening at 5 downtown, Sheri will open the doors for a public tour of her newly renovated and soon-to-be open Gizmo Art building, a project benefiting all of us here in Albuquerque that she will mention more about tonight, I hope, a little bit. I'm supposed to say this interlude. There's the exit. The restrooms are down this hall to the left and right. What was the other thing? Oh, and please turn your cell phones off from the house. Okay. And now a little bit about tonight's artist. Sheri Crider is a multidisciplinary artist with a robust visual arts practice centered on solace, respite, magic, and belonging. Their work includes interactive sculpture, VR environments, painting, and collaborative works that engage wide, non-traditional audiences. You can see why they were selected for this Out of Bounds series. Crider's journey as an artist has been deeply informed by her personal experiences, which include over a decade of homelessness, addiction, and incarceration. These experiences have shaped her artistic practice and her mission. Sheri received an academic tuition waiver and a fine arts scholarship at the University of Arizona, where they received a BFA in ceramics and queer theory, then went on to earn an MFA in sculpture from the University of New Mexico. Go Lobos. Sheri is the founder and director of Sanitary Tortilla Factory and now Gizmo Arts community art spaces here in Albuquerque. For more than 10 years, Sheri's spaces have supported emerging queer and POC artists in a comprehensive way. I first got to know Sheri and her work through Sanitary Tortilla Factory. and the community and space she created there. When I moved to Albuquerque about 6 years ago, Sanitary was immediately and so clearly vital to the art ecosystem and the community here. It was a place centered downtown, so beautifully designed, providing studios and exhibition space, even a shared kitchen and a shared woodshop, to artists of all ages and backgrounds. Stepping into a space that Sheri has created, and I mean she literally draws, designed, and then builds it from scratch, one feels how it centers community and care at every level, in its very conception and its function. People come together there, have space for ideas and for one another. This is just one aspect of Sheri's work in the world, and I believe it reflects those words: solace, respite, magic, belonging, and those permeate her expanded practice. Sheri's work has been exhibited nationally with solo and group exhibitions at the University of New Mexico Art Museum, University of Arizona Museum of Art, and the Museum of Fine Arts in Santa Fe. Crider has been the recipient of multiple grants and fellowships, including the inaugural cohort of Open Philanthropy Right of Return Fellowship, supporting original artworks to further criminal justice reform, as well as the Andy Warhol Foundation, Youth Civic Infrastructure, and Art for Justice. Her work has been reviewed in critically acclaimed periodicals, including PBS NewsHour and Hyperallergic, and many others. But now please join me in welcoming Sheri Crider.
Well, I'm so honored to be here, kind of speechless. I really, finally there's a lecture series that I fit into, Out of Bounds, right? And it made me think of, probably about 5 years ago, I went to West Business Resources, because, I've do all this business stuff and never, I know there's more that I could be doing to do it right, or, so I went to this business resource center, and the woman asked me to tell her what I did. So I proceeded to tell her about 3 of the roles that I have: being an artist, being a contractor, running an art space. And she just looked at me very puzzled, and she said, well, describe those things a little bit. And then she looked even more puzzled, and she was, the whole thing was going to be centered on the whiteboard, and she was going to quickly illustrate what I should be doing as a business person in the community. And she just handed me the pen, and I'm so grateful that, the universe has handed me the pen for my life. There was a part of my life that I didn't understand that I was the author of my own life. And through serendipity or, whatever magic resides in the world, I've been able to be the author of my own life, which is an extremely humbling experience. And and I start with this slide because, my background, which I'll go a little bit into, the community that I find residing with artists and experiencing their practices is incredibly magical. There's a certain magic that happens when you mount an exhibition, when someone becomes so vulnerable about the things they make and the ideas they have to put it on exhibition, and I've been so excited, so many times. These experiences, and I grew up in a place where I didn't have community, so the art community has been a perfect fit. And, and throughout the multiple years I've been tooling around in the art world, I have these epiphanies, and I really love the long view of history and intergenerational knowledge, and how, my artist practice is built on the practice of multiple generations, right? And we have always been able to imagine a different kind of world, a world that is equitable, where magic exists, and it seems to get a little harder sometimes, but I'm so grateful for the artists that I've had the honor to host at Sanitary through the years. And so this was a catalog that we put together for Hazel Batres Chavez and MK, and so this quote is from that. And there are certain, like, looking at the things, like doing a lecture is like a little intimidating, like, what do you include? Like, what, and especially somebody, undiagnosed ADHD, like, I could go a million different directions. And, and I really came to three things that really are through lines in my practice, like where I find solace and respite, and it is definitely in nature. Like, this is near Douglas, and the beginning image of the Abolition Library. This is right on the border, and right near where Geronimo was captured. And on a road trip, like, I got to experience this most beautiful place. And the way that I think of nature is that it's witnessed so many tragedies, so many terrible things, but still its resilience, it finds a way to grow, right? And that's mirrored in people and their experiences, that resiliency. So nature, people and their stories, and animals, of course, like Pocket, the dog, like, every dog I've ever had really shows me. And every day is a beautiful, beautiful show. So, my beginning was kind of a rough start and pretty cinematic to a degree. Like, I aspire to, like, do a lot of writing. I've actually started, writing some things. And because, and a lot of the people I work with at the jail, I go to the jail every other week and we do art and mental health. And so many of us come to this world in these situations that we never would put anyone into, right? But I've kind of, once I got out of the rough patch, I've really embraced this cinematic quality of unwinding the story of my life. So I was adopted by these two people who were really searching for the American dream, the nuclear family. Like, I believe that I was what was going to make that family whole. And I was definitely the wrong person for that role. I have, like, some report cards. Like, I guess from the very beginning, I was challenging. And then, and I really love the myths that arise. Like, so my biological mother was told that my mother was a nurse, and, this whole story of who it was. And, and through over the decades, I've found the real stories, that I was the product of an affair. And my biological mother was an alcoholic, and she almost gave me to another family because she thought it was her, this guy's child. So, so it wasn't a lot of, I don't remember a lot of fun, but I do remember dogs. Dogs are super, and I love Pattern from the very beginning. I love those pants. Like, so, and that underbelly of the American dream, like, just growing up in such, by yourself and not understanding what the world means and who you are, is a difficult challenge, right? And drugs and a lot of things terrible things happen. And luckily, you know, over about a decade, I had this counselor who asked me what I was good at. Like, so many terrible things had happened in my life, and no one had ever asked me what I was good at. And I remembered that in 4th grade, I got an art award. And so I told her that. And so this woman who shared my birthday with me, Groundhog's Day, which I think is a really cool birthday, she took me to community college. She took me to the University of Arizona Art Museum, and she said, you could be an artist. And I had no idea what this woman was talking about, right? And, but it was something, and I was good at drawing, right? So, and lucky for me, this art making thing was very healing and transformative. And I had a different story to tell than a lot of the art students. So I'm just showing you a brief kind of glimpse into that. This was a series, and I love labor-intensive things from the very beginning, like intaglio, 3 plates, like multiple editions, anything that's hard, I was down for it, right? So this was a series of prints that was called Lifestyles, after the condom, Lifestyles. So there are some accompanying prints that go with the series of prints. There were 25 of them, and they all depict, like, you know, these were right across the street from the university, this car wash. So they were really offering you a counter narrative to what you saw happening in those spaces. Uh-oh. Yeah, this is doing strange things here. So what's supposed to be with this picture of, somebody say the name for me, I'm terrible at it. Thank you. So what's supposed to be accompanying this are 2 images of books, Sister Outsider by Audre Lorde and James Baldwin's Another Country. And so my experience with my undergraduate degree is, you know, it was a system where you were a freshman, you learned certain things. You know, all of the real stories of art and academia were sequestered at the top, right? You don't get to talk about contemporary issues. You don't get to talk about any of the real deal of what art is. And so my senior semester, I took a queer theory class, and I read so many books. Like, I have goosebumps right now. Like, these books broke apart who I was. And this woman's work, like, it just gave me this different perspective of what art is, you know, and it changed what I was doing. It moved from being an insular artist, you know, working on my story, and it shifted it to, this was my senior project. This was a project called Perspectives on Home. So I worked with 3 high school youth in Tucson, and we did a collaborative print, and we did all of this resource building about helping homeless youth. And then I left school, and I was like, what the hell, right? What do you do now, you know? Luckily, I ended up going to Philadelphia, and I did a residency, and I had grown up in Phoenix, suburbs, like, just, it was, you know, and I went to Philadelphia, and it was where there were queer creatives. It just broke me apart once again, like the possibility of making art and community was a very different situation. And then I came back to the Southwest. So this is all graduate school work. So at UNM, working with Steve Berry, who was very encouraging. He was like, anything that you were working on, he would help you. He was such a committed artist and teacher. So this is a piece called Sanctioned, and this was an installation. And so there were 8 of these tables. So this is, you know, a long time ago. So like tech is really hard. Like Mary Songus knows this. You know, like to download 2 minutes of video might take you a week, if you're lucky, you know. But so what I was really, and I've always really been fascinated with empathy. Like, how do we create empathy? How can we, you know, where does it come from, right? And so the bronze cast, and you know, in slides, reproduced slides are terrible. Like, I apologize for these images. So each one of these little stations were devoted to, I would go to MDC and I would ask women where they had been harmed, either metaphorically or physically. And so I would do a bronze cast of that area of their body. And I do video. The video is of me preparing the cast. And then, you know, they would have the ability to dictate what was in the table. And then this was installation art, like at a motel down here on Central. And, you know, it sounded really cool. And that's the other thing, is really looking at art practices in a critical way, right? Like, so this installation, it was all of these artists and everybody thought it was really cool, and it was at a motel down on Central. And when the opening happened, I was appalled and shocked, because suddenly people's lives that were living in the motels were on public display. Like, it really, it really like shook me to like think, and you know, people thought I was overreacting, whatever, but you know, it's just, and I really think that I think about those things when we take art, do art, all these type of things, you know, to be really conscious of, you know, what that is and how it affects people that actually live there. So suddenly everybody could drink open containers and like peer into people's rooms. So the whole exhibition was, you were given a motel room to do an installation in. So the installation itself was really, you know, I love research, like, so I'll just go down, you know. I think a lot of my art making is very centered on research. And so this particular piece was called Trash to Tourism. So I spent about 2 months just walking up and down Central and stuff and just finding stuff in the trash. And that's what I used to inhabit this motel. And then the video is, I was filming the construction of the Big Eye, which was so incredibly beautiful. And I just loved watching that. And then I started really thinking about how, you know, the development of the interstate system affected Central, and like all of these people's lives that are kind of trapped into these historical developments of transportation, et cetera, et cetera. So that was that whole thing. So then I graduated from UNM, and again, you know, the last semester, everybody started, I remember we went to CAA, and I was like, whoa, what's happening here? Like, oh, okay, like everybody's applying for professor jobs. And I'm like, oh, okay, like maybe I should apply for, you know, because I taught as a TA. And, you know, as I was being interviewed, like 300 other people were putting their application into the box for some job in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, or, you know, wherever it was. And I went on, I got selected for a second interview, and I was terrified because I'd never experienced anything like that, where they have you captive for like 3 days. And you get to go to all those faculty dinners, and, you know, and then they ask you inappropriate questions like, who's your husband? And like, and, you know, and then I was like at a loss, like, I love students and teaching, but this is not my path, right? And I'm so grateful for, you know, to watch this institution and its faculty be expansive in addressing these kind of issues that academia is complicit with, like not talking about what are you going to do when you graduate? Survival skills for artists, like that's just been happening, it's in the very recent moment that class has actually been addressing those issues. Back in the day, you graduated and that was it, right? And lucky for me, my felony convictions kept me from getting a job at APS. They would hire me and then, even though it was 30 years ago or whatever, they wouldn't let me teach ceramics or whatever. So my incarceration really forced me to have a different life. And so I secretly started making art. This is a piece that I created with Nina Dubois. She was a grad. Some of the old folks know her, and she was still in school, and she kept like pestering me, like, why aren't you making art? Like, you should make art. Like, and so then we collaborated on this piece. And, and then I really loved making art. Like, and I had once, I had forgotten how transformative and healing that process is to actually take the time and space of doing that. And so, and luck, or I don't know what it is, but my secret life of making art got me a show at New Mexico State Museum. Mary Scully, they used to do this Alcos series where they would just highlight New Mexico artists. And so I had been secretly painting these, like, because I don't have a degree in painting, but I've been painting all of these paintings in the storage area of the first DIY space that I opened. And I think my process, my artistic process now is really centered on really coming to terms to whatever it is that my life is, what's happening in my life. So I was doing, kind of fell into doing construction. And so like the massive waste and then development. So all of the paintings are duplicate stadiums being built next to each other in process. And I love sports too, so like give me any kind of entrance. But then, it's all, to me, like the underbelly of this American dream is how much public funds are going into stadiums. The one on the left, that's the Olympic Stadium in Rio de Janeiro, MetLife, and then I forget the other one. Whoops. Barclays. So, and I really enjoy painting. So I'm operating, it's kind of like hard to talk about. So I'm just, the privilege of art making. These are the opportunities that I've had to make art. So I just kind of want to highlight those. This is an exhibition that I organized at the University of Arizona Art Museum entitled Other Targets. The piece in the front is called A Monument for Reparations, and then there's a whole nother series of painting that I did about mass incarceration. And so right before this, lucky for me, someone sent me a Facebook message about this Right of Return Fellowship. And that afforded me to make work and spend some time doing it. So all of this work, this is a piece called Humanitron. This is a piece that I collaborated with two high school seniors, Max Blankley, and I forget the other guy, but so Humanitron is a video game from the 80s where we might have learned empathy. So you rescue people in the desert. And so it's kind of like a tableau of this video game that you can interact with. And there's a reprint from the New York Times from 1986 from the beginning of the sanctuary moment. So I really like all of these kind of overwhelming, seemingly newsworthy moments that we get to experience every single day. I really like reaching back in time and seeing that this struggle has been happening for a really long time. And the kids really dug it, and it was fun. More of that installation, Janaea Sanchez, and the whole exhibition, we pulled prints from their collection that were, very like racist, terrible prints. And we had a dialogue about them. And then another place, I'm just gonna kind of blaze through these things if you guys have questions about any of this stuff. So this is Arizona, the Grand Carceral State. It's about 60 plates. I made more than half of them. And it's, talking about exploitation of both resources and, how we ended up where we are. And then, so this is the Right of Return, sponsored this exhibition at UNM Art Museum, and I started thinking about migration. All along in my construction career, I've worked with Israel Teos, who was just recently deported like 2 months ago. He's been here for 16 years. So this whole exhibition is kind of centered on his experience of needing to migrate and my grandfather's empathy. The bottom, so the bird piece is called Everyone Who Believed in the Best of Me. And all of the birds, people in my life that have supported me, they picked the materials of the birds, and then we created a mobile. And the one at the very bottom is, my grandpa gave me that after I had sold his car for crack, like just done the most terrible things to my grandfather. And in the end, he was so generous. And also, I'll never forget riding in the car with him, and he said to me, "You found an awful nice friend in that Diane, didn't you?" And I said, "Yep." He says, "No boys, huh?" And I said, "Nope." And he, went to Walmart and bought me a leather wallet with a chain on it. He was just, so cool, right? So, and this bird, so when I moved to the East Coast in Philadelphia, he gave me this bird. He would always make these birds. And it was such a beautiful metaphor, how it was painted with black around the edges and the wings were on backwards. And and this exhibition had a lot of birds in it. And I really like to have strategic conversations with different communities. And these are a group of women at Crossroads for Women. And we did a bunch of workshops, and we made these birds out of their parole papers. Super cool. There was a woman that I just saw a month ago who was in this group. Yeah, she's right in the middle. And she's now a public defender, I think. And I saw her at the jail, and she said, "I still have that bird at my desk." And I was like, that's cool. That's Israel right there. This is the good part of the story. He got deported, and he got to see his 2 daughters that he put through school for the last 20 years. Lots of kind of, there's an interactive room in there. It was totally fun and so amazing that R.F. Khan was, and Tracy Quinn, who's no longer here, was supportive in hosting this exhibition. So then do we know what time it is? Because I want to know. 6:05. 6:05. Halfway? Okay. So, you know, and it's interesting the conversations I have in my head, and I don't know if other people have these, you know, like you want to be successful as an artist, and you don't quite know what that means, and like, you know, I have a lot of dialogue about like what that means, you know, and so this was this magazine article about this exhibition, and it was like 4 pages. Like, it was like a really cool spread, but it was in like the most terrible magazine that I thought. It was the most terrible magazine. It was called The Artist Magazine, right? So it's like for hobbyists in the Midwest, or like, you know, like who is reading this, right? I'm like, great, you know, hobbyists in the Midwest are gonna know about this art that I made. Perfect. And my universe has a pretty good sense of humor. And so out of this, I got this letter from death row in Texas, right? So because of the censorship of magazines, et cetera, in prisons, Obie Weathers got that cheesy magazine that I thought was going to people in the Midwest. So that really, you know, really, like, oh, okay, I need to just, you know. And so that magazine article provided me with this amazing relationship with someone who's been on death row since he was 18 years old. He's 42 now. So we've been able to collaborate on a lot of work together. So this was a surveillance, you know, we see them in all the parking lots, these surveillance units that are supposed to make us feel safer. So we wanted to make one of those and make it into like a mutual aid site. So this was our first attempt at doing this. It's very difficult to collaborate with someone on death row. I mean, this is probably 7 years ago, I'd say. Things have come a long ways. Obie now has contraband phones, so like we can text, be a lot more versatile in our collaborations. So this is Obie, and this is his cell. It's much more hideous than I ever imagined. But he is so remarkable in his spirit and his love for himself and for the possibility of transformation. And so this is when he had his first contraband phone. So he's got to send me some selfies and stuff, which I thought was so cool. So we started working on this VR piece that was at 516 a couple years ago. And so this is a drawing that he sent me of his cell. And, you know, there he's got bell hooks. Like, he is, his knowledge base is huge. So this is the space. So we really wanted to, you know, again, center empathy. Like, how do we make Obie, like some terrible thing happened in his life, how do we make him a human being to the audience? And so I think the piece was pretty successful. He sent me, I had some audio tracks that I was going to play, but I didn't decided not to do it. So he would send me audio tracks from prison, like singing. You can hear Amazing Grace being sung on death row, and it's like, it's haunting, right? And then he layered onto that some poetry that he had written about being queer. And this is my friend, so that lady who asked me what I was good at in 4th grade, I sent her an email like a few years back. You know, she thought I was a psycho at first, like, whoa, like, you know, and I just told her like how her asking that question really transformed my life. And so they came, it was when we had the solar, or whatever it was. Like, so they came and they saw the show, and it was really cool. So, and that's the piece with no one in it. And the image that's etched on the mirror is a picture of Obi and his sister fishing in the Gulf Shore with his father. Okay. And then probably 2 years ago, someone, I didn't know a social practice artist until Christine Wong Yap came and did a residency. And Christine Wong Yap is rad. And, she taught me about social practice and that, that's a legitimate thing. And a couple of years ago, I met with a curator and she was like, kind of berating me. You're a social practice artist. And I was like, okay, I'm a social practice artist. I don't know. But I always really see art as a strategy for transformation. And this is a piece that Nancy Zestoodle wrote, Art World Isn't Enough, and it really kind of talks about, I was really inspired by, I don't know how many of you are familiar with Project Row Houses. It's this rad project in Louisiana. And Rick Lowe, I think his name is, there were these kids that lived on that block. So they changed this whole block into art spaces and invited artists in. And the thing that I'm always concerned about is like gentrification. Like there's so many layers to unpack on all of that. But so these two young boys that were in Louisiana, they challenged Rick Lowe. They were like, why are you guys making art about all of this terrible things? Like, why don't you do something about it? And that has really resonated for me. And it's not enough to just make art about all of the terrible things that people are experiencing and the inequity. Like, how can art leverage actual change? And this is like a whole section about how sanitary, and that's the whole thing too, is like, I really like tangible results. Like when I was in graduate school and like at the end, I was so mad because they told me I had to have a show, and everywhere I went, I had to like pay somebody to have a show. And I'm like, well, this is the stupidest thing. I paid for the education, paid the labor, made the art. Now I got to pay to have a show. Like, what have I done, right? And and then, there was the really cool academic guys that were the like kings of the DIY world in Albuquerque. And I remember it took me so much to like give them a proposal, and they just totally disregarded me. They wouldn't even look at the proposal. So I was like, I'll just make my own space. And so sanitary, there's a whole chapter. We did, I think 2006. So for 4 to 5 years, we ran, I always say we, but it's really me and with backup help from Barbara, a space, and it was really amazing, again, to experience that magic. And then Sanitary Tortilla Factory was just the most amazing place. And it was like so meant to be, like, I just can't even explain it. Like, and through the build out of this space, I resurrected this whole history of how that restaurant had supported artists in the 70s. Frank McCullough, Tina Fuentes, like all of these, we have this tendency to think that we're artists or whatever, and we don't, necessarily talk about or think about the people that have been doing this for a long time. And so this resurrection of these artists was like one of the coolest things that this space manifested So we had a show called Love, Art, and Tortillas, and we welcomed all those artists back to the space to have an exhibition. And there was like the hugest painting of like the 5 hongo burrito, like, you know. And I really wanted that painting, but the guy wanted like 10 grand for it, and it wasn't a great painting. But so those kind of things were amazing. And then the mural pastel, this is a gift of a collaboration between 516 Arts and Valerie Roybal, who was a beautiful friend and artist in this community who left too soon. But she left us this amazing mural through this show she curated at 516. And the amazing banner from Fronteristas and Hazel Batres Chavez. This was Martine Wanman's exhibition. Like, just so, every show, like, so much magic. This is a beautiful image from the show from Nora Wendell and Mitchell Squire, which was one of my most favorite shows. But we've hosted over 60 exhibitions, 4 residencies, 15 MFA exhibitions, below market studio space, et cetera, et cetera. So, and this was all manifested out of that thing of being dropped off out of graduate school with nothing, right? Graduate school's over, you don't have a job, you don't have any place to make anything, you have nothing. And so trying to create a space that can hold the needs of artists. And so there's sanitary, and then this is one of my favorite public art experiences. So this is by the Sunport, and it's 15 by 50 feet. And this was a public art studio that I designed to try to create a different kind of public art. And this grew out of, when I first got out of graduate school, I got a public art thing. It's way on the west side on a fire station. And it was a terrible experience. Like, it was supposed to be collaborative and community-based, and it was, and I thought I'd make some money, and I made maybe $11 an hour or something. But it grew out of the inadequacy of creating a collaborative piece where people could have autonomy and youth could learn about the role of public art. So we had 4 lead artists, Nani Chacon, shown here with her mural at Washington Middle School, Grace Rosario Perkins, Andrea De Leon, who's on the right, and I'm trying to think, and me. That was the 4th. So, and this was right when COVID hit. So the dream of this was to unite students from the most prestigious high school in Albuquerque, which is Academy, in my opinion, and kids that were incarcerated. So I wanted to have this studio where professional artists could talk about the role of public art while we re-envisioned a 1950s postcard about Albuquerque. And so the same organization that allowed me to adopt 2 children, CYFD, would not allow me to go into the youth facility. So that took me a year. Luckily, I had remodeled this woman's house who had a close friend to the cabinet secretary. So I had to plead my worthiness and trustfulness with the cabinet secretary under the governor to get into the youth facility. So it took me like so long to do this. And then COVID hit and they did not return a phone call. So my plan was kind of foiled, but these are the young women from Academy. And so we proceeded without doing the work in the detention center, which actually ended up being more well-suited because I think the 2 young women that ended up helping me to be in conversation and with these young women, the disparities of their lives would have been really disheartening, I think, to them. So I'm really glad that the studios happened apart from each other. Like, all of them had cars, all of them are going to college. The other artists didn't have those luxuries. So this moment at Albuquerque Museum was one of my favorite moments of the studio. So we got to speak to Josie Lopez, and then another woman who had been an academy history teacher, just had recently moved to the museum. And so, you know, and we're sitting in front of the I can't say it, Oñate sculpture. So we had just experienced the shooting, the removal of the Oñate sculpture, and we were having a conversation about this, right? And so during this whole session, that history teacher was able to tell these young women, one of the young women asked her why she had never heard of Juneteenth at Academy. And the history teacher proceeded to tell her about the donors of Academy and about the information that they are permitted to teach. And so, like, really kind of peeling off the layers of how education functions in the replication of racism and homophobia, et cetera, et cetera. So in the end, there were 11 artists, and we all created a counter narrative of Albuquerque, and it ranges from the Pueblo riot to, this one's the Zia symbol. Angie Abieta, her grandfather was an accomplished artist in the Zia Pueblo, and that's her on the left. So these are the other two young ladies that we rounded the project out, and we got to install it with these ladies. So that was, you know, that was really fun. So Art for Justice, Mobile Abolition Library, that's right out there. You know, Bernadine Hernandez and Fronteristas. Like, all of this was just an idea. I still think there's a lot of kinks to work out. Should have never bought an electric vehicle. But, you know, the library, this was one of Bernadine's dreams of, like, what if we had this library that we could take to everyone, and we could, you know, have this collection of books. And, you know, you know, I love a challenge of making something. And, you know, the thing that I wondered is, like, how do we create entrances to the conversation of abolition? I think that in this historical moment, everything is right and wrong, binary conversations, and we need to create more complex conversations about these issues that we're facing. Portraits are really cool and fun to do. This is Elaine. Elaine is on our board. We formed a nonprofit to, like, further the work of criminal justice reform. You know, and just, you know, that fellowship in 2017, the right of return, really shifted the work I was making and really centered it in criminal justice reform. This was, you know, and the thing that I love out of these projects, like these collaborations, the Seeding Radical Futures last semester it just blew me away. Like, what the students created was a zine and a seed library. This is...
I was also thinking of waiting, so we have two more coming.
I mean, it's just like... Let's see if it's gonna, it's not gonna move now. Okay. Yeah, so the library has touched so many lives and has been so fun to figure out, you know. Again, I wish it was a gas-powered vehicle, because I've had a lot of opportunities outside of the state. It's a no can do with the electric vehicle. So this whole vehicle is a collaboration. Delilah Montoya, who's in the studio and a legend here in Albuquerque, we had the amazing experience. I took her back to that place where the Ocotillos is, where Ocotillos are, and the border wall. The place I chose for this image, it's the largest North American surveillance site, and it's right on the border of Douglas. And a more recent project with Fronteristas and Sue Hahn and Haley Greenfeather, Necessary Futures. And I mean, it's just so remarkable to come together and to have multiple voices, talking about some of the similar issues. And then there's some of my secret painting on the wall. This is Freedom Reads. So then again, like in all these exhibitions, I really like to circle back to tangible things that can be actionable outside of the museum. Freedom Reads is this amazing project. A colleague of mine, Dwayne Betts, has created. These will be coming to New Mexico in the next 2 years. We're currently working on conversations with wardens. So this is a 500 book collection of books, the most amazing collection of art books, poetry. Dwayne Betts, Pulitzer Prize winner, Guggenheim Fellow, like just off the charts. And he has this amazing project where he sends these handcrafted libraries into prisons. And a slide back from that. So we did about 17 libraries in Colorado 3 years ago. And there was an earlier picture of Juliana, who's been my intern from a charter school for the last 2 years. And her father was incarcerated in those prisons. And so like us building these objects and her participation in that really allowed her to talk about that experience and allowed us to form a powerful relationship where she is now like stepping into herself and really feeling empowered about her experience and how important her voice is. And then the images on the right is Casa Carmelita, which is in El Paso. Another colleague of the Art for Justice crew, Juan Ortiz. This is a on the ground, feeding people on the border. They do so much, and they make art. So now, probably 6 months ago, I was at this crossroads, and I've really kind of like allowed the universe to decide what's going to happen, and my life could have had two very different paths. One where I just step away from everything, the community, art spaces, and because I had already sold Sanitary, and this wasn't yet solid. So it was kind of an interesting feeling to have, like what the universe was going to decide. And so now here we are, and I'm so grateful to Raven, like what a christening of this art space. The Tigway project was incredible, beyond incredible, right? So this was super cool. And dogs love it at Gizmo. I have, so I kept wanting to put all the pictures in here of every dog that's been in Gizmo and every dog in my life, and I'm like, okay, that's another lecture. But Sonora is on the left, and Pocket, and Barbara. I can't thank Barbara enough for believing in me and supporting me. And
questions before we go over to the mezzanine?
When is you know, I've been at the bar across the street from the Gizmo building 1,000 times. Sort of looked at it, and over the past couple of years, just wondered like what somebody would do with it. And I think it's so inspiring that you know, made the so much effort to put something there and make it a space for everybody. Do you have any idea of when it's going to open?
It's a very good question. I really like what Wally said, that it was newly remodeled. I wish. You know, the bureaucracy, the paper side of it, the city has graciously, they're going to repair the elevators. So there are a lot of factors I have no control of. So I hope, you know, by February. But, you know, many years ago I had this mantra, like when I got out of graduate school, I really wanted to know what was going to happen, what I was going to do, what was I going to be doing. And I embraced this mantra that I wanted my life to be an exciting novel. And yeah. I'm kind of done with that now. I kind of want to know. But yeah, so hopefully soon.
Sheri, thank you so much for sharing so much with us. It's been a pleasure to hear. Throughout sort of the story that you've given us tonight, you talked about being in so many different places, Philadelphia, Arizona, here. So what drew you to landing in Albuquerque and deciding to, I think you've talked around it and you've talked to it, but I would love to hear why Albuquerque and like why setting so many rules and doing so much here and not in Arizona or Philadelphia.
Yeah, Albuquerque's special, you know, like for many reasons. And I think, you know, the history that have clashed here, the history, you know, and I think that Albuquerque is a really interesting place. Like most of the other cities that I've lived in, poverty, crime is like sequestered like on the south side or something. And I think Albuquerque is not like that, you know, and I think that I don't know what the word to call it, but that possibility, it doesn't allow you to not see it. And so I think that is, can be a strategic, I like say this more eloquently a lot of other times. But it is like, I mean, Albuquerque just really, that, I don't know how to say it. But it's like Albuquerque, like, it's really good for us to see poverty, for all of those things to be up and center.
When did art making go from a transformative healing into a, as you put it, a luxury, privilege, and responsibility? Because you were kind of showing the healing side through your work with the sanctions that you did. So you can kind of see like the healing that you brought to other people through that. But for you personally, when was that shift of going from the transformative healing into the privilege aspect of making art?
Well, I think when I came to school and I could devote so much time to make it, I mean, you know, when you're in graduate school, like, I mean, there's no time like that where you can just devote yourself to making work, and it's such a privilege to have that time and space because, you know, outside of that, it's always the race of time and money, and you know, but it remains transformative and healing, like no matter what the situation.
I love how you shared that your secret paintings. And you know, as I'm watching you share this body of work with us, I see you, I'm experiencing you as a producer. You know, you're very much central to production of so many experiences and spaces for other people in so many different ways. And yet you have these degrees, these art degrees, you know, and this secret painting practice from years back. I'm very curious if you're willing to share what your personal art practice looks like these days, like in your home when you have time outside of the Gizmo building and running around dealing with contractors. Do you pick up a paintbrush? Are you throwing clay on the wheel? Like what does your art practice look like for you personally?
Thank you. I mean, the Necessary Futures show, I think there's 4 new paintings in there, and I produce best when I just have to do it, you know. And then using a material, I use gouache, where like I have to be very assertive with the material and like know what I'm doing. Like there's no stepping back, you know. So that, and then you know, and I'm also still doing some stuff with the people at the jail. So there's, you know, there's a variety of opportunities for making art.
Maybe one more, if there is.
Oh. Thank you, Sheri. It's been a remarkable life you have had. And I'm going to ask you a very sort of down-to-earth administrative question. Have you formed, to create this building that you are working on, which is wonderful and needs to be promoted as much as possible, but have you formed a nonprofit to support it?
Yes. A year and a half ago, we formed an organization called Golden. So, and that's a whole process unto itself. There, you know, and you know, capitalism and the structures, the economic structures that exist, necessitate these other things that I don't so much enjoy, the paperwork part. But.